Starstruck Girls and Mexican School for Scandal by Sam Dillon on August 9, 1999, for the New York Times. Karina Yapor's parents fight back tears as they recall how their daughter left home when she was 12, carrying her Bible and her school bag, to begin music lessons at a boarding school run by the manager of Gloria Trevi, Mexico's most famous rock star. 5 years later, Karina is at the center of a scandal rocking a Spanish speaking entertainment world that stretches from Madrid to Mexico City. Her parents have accused Miss Trevi and her manager, Sergio Andrade, of preying on the youthful ambitions and adoration of Karina and then sexually abusing her during her years in their care as an aspiring starlet. The Yapors have adopted a baby whom Karina, then 14, conceived and later abandoned while living with Mr. Andrade. We just keep praying these people would let our girl come home. Teresa Yapor, Karina's mother, said, weeping softly in her living room. For half a year now, her daughter, now 16, has been nowhere to be found. Several other young women have emerged to accuse Miss Trevi of luring them and dozens of other girls into Mr. Andrade's cult of pop music and abusive sex over the last decade. One woman says in a best-selling book that when she was one of Mr. Andrade's hopeful, the manager beat her with his belt and forced sex on her at the age of 14, then kept her beneath his desk. Another woman says Mr. Andrade used the 12 and 13-year-old girls to film pornographic movies. Nothing remotely like this has occurred in the history of Mexican show business. Pati Chapoy, an on-screen personality at TV Azteca, who has known Andrade for 19 years, said in an interview, the Yapors and two young women have lodged parallel criminal complaints. Neither Ms. Trevi nor Mr. Andrade have been charged with crimes, although prosecutors in Chihuahua and Mexico have subpoenaed them for questioning. So Mrs. Trevi and Mr. Andrade, a heavy set, who is the brother of a governing party senator, have gone underground. They are playing a cat and mouse with police, joining a list of drug traffickers, a former governor, and other wealthy Mexicans who thumb their noses at law enforcement here. A man who was their lawyer called television station last month to announce that Miss Trevi would appear publicly to deny the swirling accusations, but she did not. The lawyer has disappeared, and leaders of the Mexican bar associations said in interviews he was unknown to them. Hugo Gonzalez, president of a network of Gloria Trevi fan clubs, said in an interview that Miss Trevi, now 29, phoned him a month ago. He said that she told him, don't worry, I'm in a safe place in Mexico. I'm innocent, and the little girl will return home. This will turn out okay. Newspaper and television shows all across Latin America and Spain have made their rock star fall as a tumultuous spectacle as her glitzy rise. Miss Trevi, whose real name is Gloria de Los Angeles Treviño, shot to fame in the early 90s as an iconoclast who sung youthful frustration while understanding male fans. She posed on pin-up calendars that made her Mexico's #1 heartthrob. Offstage, she was outspoken about topics like virginity and drugs, attracting the admiration of some intellectuals. She's one of our most authentic artists. Elena Poniatowska, a respected journalist, wrote in a 1995 profile of the rock star. Choreographing Miss Trevi's image behind the scenes was Mr. Andrade, a successful pop composer with his own production company and a stable of female musicians. Miss Trevi was a blockbuster success, partly because Mr. Andrade and Televisa, Mexico's largest television network, promoted her to adults as a sex symbol, even as they were marketing her craziness to audiences of children. She is an example of how television can magnify little spectacles, transforming performance into symbols of rebellion. Carlos Monsiváis, an intellectual who wrote an admiring 1991 essay on Miss Trevi, said in an interview, the conclusion I draw now is that the show business culture makes people so crazy they even feel themselves beyond the law. During Miss Trevi Rise, Televisa organized a beauty contest of little kids as Trevi impersonators, and thousands of children were carried to her concerts by their mothers. One fan was Karina, who at age 8 shrieked in delight at the sight of Miss Trevi's wild, berry bone mane. Gloria, I love you. Karina screamed so insistently at successive concerts that Miss Trevi began to distinguish her from the thousands of fans. And in 1994, when Karina was 12, Miss Trevi invited her and her mother to her hotel room. Look how big you've gotten, Miss Trevi said, stroking Karina's red hair. At the time, Mr. Andrade had recently divorced his fourth wife, Aline Hernandez, whom he had married when she was his 15-year-old student. Miss Trevi urged Miss Yapor to take Karina to Mexico City to try out for a scholarship to attend Mr. Andrade Music School. After the audition, Mrs. Yapor was introduced to Mr. Andrade. Karina is a little diamond that just needs polishing, he told Mrs. Yapor. They painted this like a huge opportunity, Mrs. Yapor recalled. Gloria said she had a little sister just like Karina. It was very difficult not to trust these people. Days later, Karina's parent agreed to enroll her, signing a notarized statement giving two women working with Andrade permission to travel freely with Karina in their custody, even outside Mexico. But the day after Karina's November 1994 departure for Mexico City, her mother panicked, telephoning Mr. Andrade's office to plead for Karina to return home. Mother, please, Karina responded. This is my opportunity. Don't make me come home. At first, Karina called home every week, but the pace of the calls then fell off once every month or two. Later, Mrs. Yapor discovered that the phones for Mr. Andrade's school had been disconnected. Karina's first visit home came a year later. She played the piano beautifully, but her face was covered with acne and she seemed troubled and distant. After that, there were four other visits. Over 3 years, she was never home for her birthdays or Christmas. Miss Trevi accompanied Karina on one visit home in 1997, and both of them warned the Yapors not to read the forthcoming book by Miss Hernandez, Mr. Andrade's former wife. Miss Trevi said that it was filled with lies. La Gloria por el Infierno, published last year, contained the first public accusations. Like Karina, Miss Hernandez was recruited by Miss Trevi, and her book details the process of psychological subjection by which she says Mr. Andrade gradually cut her off from her family and dominated her sexually before marrying her when she was 15. In contrast to the image of Miss Trevi as a bold and independent woman, Miss Hernandez portrayed her as a passive wife, so complained with Mr. Andrade's demands that she helped him overwhelm dozens of teenage girls. The Yapor said that they did not read the book, but soon after its publication, authorities called to inform them that Karina had been living in Spain with Mr. Andrade and dozens of other girls, where she had given birth at the age of 15 to a baby, Francisco Ariel. When Karina abandoned the baby last year, he weighed just 8 pounds. The Yapors agreed to take custody, and an official flew him from Spain to Mexico. In March, the Yapor family filed their criminal suit accusing Miss Trevi and her manager of kidnapping and corrupting the morals of a minor. Their suit has encouraged other women to come forward to testify about abuses. One of Mr. Andrade's former students brought the Yapors a pornographic 1996 calendar produced by Mr. Andrade, which features Karina as its April model. She was then 14, wearing only a tiny bikini. As Mrs. Yapor spread Miss April out on her table for our reporter to see, she broke again into tears, provoking wails from Francisco Ariel, crawling at her feet. We didn't give Karina to you, Mrs. Yapor muttered. You run her. Now let her come home.